Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 1991 Linares series featuring Vassily Ivanchuk. Now in my previous video I told you that in the first 7 rounds before facing Anand in round 8 he defeated Kasparov and Karpov, when in fact he defeated also Gata Kamsky in round 4. I misread the information on chessgames.com, so sorry about that. So this is round 4. Ivanchuk is playing against Gata Kamsky. And the Kamsky, well, he's originally from Russia, but later he became an American Grandmaster. He was awarded the Grandmaster title in 1990, so 1 year prior to this event, and well, this is the first tournament of this strength for him. So he didn't really do that well in the tournament. In the end, he only had 2.5 points. He got last place. But nevertheless, I'm sure it was quite an experience. And this game he's playing against Vassily Ivanchuk. Kamsky has the white pieces, and there are very interesting things in the chess world. But here, for example, Ivanchuk goes for the martial attack. So this is something else completely. So let's see this game. And well, one legend of the martial attack. It is said that Frank Marshall actually invented the martial attack some 8 years before he actually played it in the tournament. He was waiting to use it against someone who is worthy. And well, for that someone he chose the great Cuban, Jose Raul Capablanca. And well, although even Capablanca met with this attack for the first time over the board, it wasn't enough to defeat Capablanca. Capablanca defended well, and he won a great brilliancy. But this is the game Kamsky-Ivanchuk, so let's see it. Kamsky plays e4, we have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez. a6, the Morphy defense, bishop to a4, knight to f6, castles, bishop to e7, now rook to e1, b5, this is all standard theory, bishop to b3, Ivanchuk castles, and we have c3, practically inviting black to go for the martial attack. Those who fear the martial attack will play something like h3 here, the anti-martial variation. But Kamsky is young, and well, I'm sure he wasn't afraid of Ivanchuk going for the martial attack, so he played c3, and Ivanchuk plays d5. A pawn sacrifice, but black acquires immense activity. E captures on d5, knight captures on d5, and now white grabs a pawn. Knight captures on e5. We have knight captures on e5 and rook captures on e5. And there are a lot of options here for black. In this game, Ivanchuk played pawn to c6, which is an improvement on the game Marshall versus Capablanca versus Marshall. But I will just show one variation where black responds with knight to f6, as this is one of my favorite variations, and I won a couple of games with white in this line. So d4 for white, now bishop to d6 with an attack on the rook, rook to e1, and now knight to g4, going for h2. So h3, kicking the knight, and now queen to h4. Now the queen is threatening queen captures on f2. And after queen to f3, black plays knight captures on f2. Queen captures on f2, and now black thinks that he's winning a great victory with bishop to g3, now attacking the queen and the rook. But here, all of his dreams crumble, as white has this beautiful resource of playing queen captures on f7 with check. There is no good move here. If you move the king, queen grabs rook is checkmate, so rook captures queen, and now rook to e8 is checkmate, because this rook on f7 is pinned from the bishop on b3. So here, just a fun line to show before the actual game. So after rook captures on e5, Ivanchuk didn't go for knight to f6, he went for c6. This is an improvement. We have d4, now bishop to d6, and Kamsky plays rook to e2. Not going for rook to e1 to go for some standard queen to h4 ideas. So even though he was young, he was 17 years old here, he was no stranger to the secrets of the martial attack. Bishop to g4, now attacking the rook and the queen, f3, bishop to h5, and bishop captures on d5. Kamsky gives up the bishop pair. He wants to grab that strong piece on d5, to maybe be able to preserve his extra pawn. C captures on d5, and we have knight to d2. Kamsky wants to develop this knight, well, either with b3, although after b3 it's not really going anywhere, so probably knight to f1 to e3 to wherever will be possible. But Ivanchuk has a plan for that. f5. We have queen to b3, now attacking the d5 pawn, and the bishop to f7. Knight to f1, preparing to further develop the knight, but Ivanchuk plays f4. And it's enough to look at this position to see what a beast Ivanchuk was. White is up a pawn, but I'm sure he's not really proud of it. I mean, this knight isn't going anywhere. He can't go to g3, he can't go to e3. He can't go to d2 and then e4 or c4. This knight isn't going anywhere. And with f4, this bishop is completely locked in. So how do you develop here as white? It's not an easy task. Kamsky tried bishop to d2. He says, well, if I can't do anything, I will at least double up my rooks on the e file. We have queen to d7, rook a to e1, now doubling up, and a5. Ivanchuk wants to pressure white's position even further with a4. We have a3, now a4, queen to d1, and bishop to g6. But even without this bishop to g6 move, if you look at this position, I mean, Kamsky does have doubled rooks on the e file, but this rook cannot go anywhere. It can't go to e3, e4, e5. All of the squares are covered, and he doesn't really have a move. Ivanchuk plays bishop to g6. He wants to improve the position of this bishop, as it wasn't that strong on f7, but it will be very strong on f5. It will cut both this way and this way. And it seems like Ivanchuk is allowing Kamsky to play something like rook to e6, maybe activating one of his rooks. But after bishop to f5, this is improving the bishop's position for free, and this rook simply has to go back to e2. And, well, it's the same position, only Ivanchuk's bishop seems to have teleported from f7 to f5. So this would be terrible for white. So after bishop to g6, we have bishop to c1. Probably a waiting move, not allowing Ivanchuk any tactics with bishop to d3, improving the position of the bishop even further. So bishop to c1, and now rook to f7. We have h3, probably again a waiting move, and also making room for the knight on h2 to maybe be able to develop on g4. Bishop to f5, Ivanchuk improves the position of the bishop, now knight to h2. And I mean, Kamsky is hoping to play knight to g4 to achieve at least something. If this knight jumps to g4 and then to e5, then maybe he would be able to do something. But Ivanchuk says, no you don't, and pushes h5. So the knight is, this is a very sad knight. Rook to f2, probably another waiting move. Rook a to f8, knight to f1 now, rook to f6. Ivanchuk is pretty much doing whatever he wants here. He will consider maybe playing rook to g6, attacking on the g file, or anything really. Knight back to h2, there really isn't anything better. King to h8 by Ivanchuk, who knows why he played this. Probably to provoke young Kamsky to do something unsound. And well, in fact, Kamsky does this. He plays b3. He wants to try something. He would like to open up the position a bit, at least on the queen side, to get at least some activity. But Ivanchuk immediately realizes what a huge blunder this b3 move was, and Ivanchuk's plan is next. Now Ivanchuk will transfer these doubled rooks from the f file to the c file. This rook here and this rook here. So rook to c8, as now this c pawn is weak. Because b3 was played. Bishop to b2, defending the c pawn, and we have king to h7, improving the position of the king first, as white doesn't really have a move to play. Ivanchuk can pretty much set up the position any way he likes before he does what he plans to do. Knight back to f1, we have rook f to f8, preparing that rook to also go to the c file. Rook f to e2, doubling up, now rook to c7. Knight back to h2. This knight is very, very sad. Ivanchuk plays rook f to c8, now doubling up on the c file, and the knight goes back to f1. Because Kamsky is also thinking, I mean, okay, what is this Ivanchuk guy doing? He's doubling rooks on the c-file, and my bishop is protecting c3. What's he gonna do? But Ivanchuk finds a way. He plays b4. Ivanchuk sacrifices another pawn to blast open the position. A captures on b4 was played, and now a3, inviting this bishop to capture on a3, so Ivanchuk can play rook captures on c3, and he does. Kamsky plays bishop captures on a3. An interesting way would be if Kamsky played bishop to a1. But this allows Ivanchuk a very interesting gameplay with rook captures on c3, sacrificing the exchange and creating that amazingly strong passed pawn, the a pawn. Bishop captures, rook captures, and after a move like rook to e8, queen to a7, preparing to push the pawn and also pressuring this d4 pawn. And after something like rook to d8, bishop captures on b4, rook captures on d5, and rook to d3, with an attack on the queen, with an attack on the rook, also preparing to push the pawn, threatening this d4 pawn. This would be completely crushing for black. So after a3, Kamsky decided not to go for this. He played bishop captures on a3, and rook captures on c3 was played. And now Ivanchuk's double rooks on the c-file are very strong. King to h2. We have rook to a8, attacking the bishop on a3. Bishop to b2 with an attack on the rook. Now rook to d3 with a tempo on the queen. Queen to c1. Now rook to c8, again with a tempo on the queen. Rook to c2. Rook captures. Queen captures. And, well, it's very hard to believe that in this position Ivanchuk didn't play the best move, which is a pretty simple tactic. Actually, Ivanchuk played bishop to g6 to give this bishop further protection, but the bishop was actually protected by the queen on d7. So Ivanchuk could have easily played here rook captures on f3, destroying this king's defenses and opening up an attack on the queen. But for some reason, maybe Ivanchuk did see this, but he didn't find a way how to continue this. But I don't think it's that hard to continue this attack. I mean, now this f-pawn can move. After your rook moves, this bishop becomes alive. This would have been amazing. But okay, Ivanchuk didn't play the strongest move. After queen to c2, he played bishop to g6, now consolidating, still threatening all sorts of discoveries after the rook moves. Queen to f2. Bishop captures on b4 now with a tempo on the rook. Rook to e5. We have rook to d1. Queen to e2, and now rook to b1, now harassing this bishop on b2. We have rook to g5, and queen to c6. Rook goes back to e5, and now queen to c2. Ivanchuk is offering a trade of queens, but also he's not fearing Kamsky's next move, which is, well, it took some calculation, but it's no problem for Ivanchuk. Kamsky played rook captures on h5. The rook cannot be captured. If you capture the rook, Ivanchuk loses the queen, and with check, this would be pretty terrible. So after rook to h5, Ivanchuk calmly goes king to g8, and, well, now Kamsky's rook is attacked on h5. The bishop here is attacked twice. What's he gonna do? Only move that prolongs this somehow. Well, he does queen to e6 with check. Bishop blocks, and we have rook to h8, as, well, no other move really helps Kamsky here. King captures, queen captures on f7, and, well, this would have been a great opportunity for Ivanchuk to blunder the game, as, well, Kamsky is leaving him with some options. He can play rook captures on f1, he can play rook captures on b2, he can play queen captures on b2, and if in fact Ivanchuk played something like queen captures on b2, this game would have ended in a draw. Because now, after queen h5, there is no escaping a perpetual check. King g8, queen captures on d5, king f8, queen f5, king g8, queen d5, king back, queen back, and if you play something like king d8, then you get queen to b5 check, And now if you go to a dark square, the queen will capture the bishop with check. If you go back to the light square, or yeah, for example f7, then queen back to f5, and there is no escaping perpetual check. You can try this for yourselves if you want. So after queen to f7, Ivanchuk, of course, doesn't blunder the game away. He plays queen to c6. Now preparing queen to h6 if any checks are given. Bishop to c3 was played. Also, again, trying to give Ivanchuk a chance to blunder with queen captures on c3. But this wouldn't allow a draw. If queen captures on c3, the queen would now be protecting the bishop on b4, and this would be still winning. But Ivanchuk played queen to c6, bishop captures on c3 was played, queen to f8, king to h7, and now after queen to f5 check, queen to g6 blocking the check, and in this position the 17-year-old grandmaster resigned the game, as I mean, there is nothing to do here. He was hoping to maybe grab the rook if Ivanchuk played something else, but after queen g6 there is simply nothing to hope for here. And yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. This was round 4. So again, sorry about that. In the previous video I said that before facing Anand he only defeated Kasparov and Karpov, but he defeated Kasparov, Karpov and Kamsky now in round 4. And well, I hope you enjoyed the game, and I don't think I was ever sorry for any piece like this poor knight that Kamsky had. I do hope you enjoyed this. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. And oh yeah, my channel did hit 40,000 subscribers today, so I will try and maybe do a tournament or two over the weekend. I didn't do so much streaming lately because my internet provider really sucked, and well, the last two tournaments I had were really lagging, and the stream got disconnected a couple of times. So I fixed my internet provider now. I mean, I didn't fix it, I changed it. So I think it should be better now. So I will try to make a tournament for subscribers probably on Friday and on Sunday. I don't think I'll be able to do it on Saturday, but I will let you know in tomorrow's video definitely. And I will not be doing a giveaway for 40,000 subscribers. I'm saving for a nice giveaway when my channel hits 50,000 subscribers. So yeah, again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon.